Before we get to the real content of the lunch conversation, I want to do a quick shout out and thank our sponsors for this event, starting with my old friends at the Stand Together Trust. Very, very grateful for your many years of friendship and partnership, for myself as an employee, obviously, and then now being here from Stand Together to FREOPP. So thank you very much for your support of what we do. To the Bradley Foundation, the Pope Foundation, and to Arnold Ventures. Thank you all very, very much for helping make this event a possibility and for everything that we do at FREOPP. So with that, I want to kick us off. I'm so excited about this award that we're giving away today. Folks might know, so FREOPP gives what we refer to as the Frederick Douglass Award. Frederick Douglass, of course, said that he is willing to partner with anyone to do good and no one to do bad. FREOPP tries to embody so much of what Frederick Douglass stood for. And I think in this day and age, in these polarized times, and times when Washington in particular can just seem so unproductive, it's very difficult to find hope. And I alluded to that this morning in my remarks, right? That the last 10 years, when you look at the national conversation, has not really been a terribly healthy one. But the one bright star has been the states over and over and over again. And we are going to highlight what I think is frankly the brightest star of those states in one particular area, but really several of those. Look, I'm a New Englander. I'm a Northeasterner from Rhode Island, went to school in Massachusetts, lived down in D.C. I know full well the reputation that a lot of Americans, particularly on the coast, have of the Deep South, and in particular, frankly, of Mississippi. The low rankings, the high rates of different kinds of problems and things like that. And it's very, very easy for anyone to just throw your hands up and say, well, look, that's how it's always been. That's how it's always going to be. Government can step up and provide people more benefits and create a hammock to make, poverty materially less miserable than it was the day before. But the recipient of this award has simply refused to take those statistics and those figures and those stories laying down since the day that he entered public service. We are going to get into some more of the issue specifics here, but really across the board on education, taxes, regulation, workforce development, he has championed cause after cause after cause that has been absolutely critical to fostering greater upward mobility, specifically for Americans on the bottom half of the socioeconomic ladder in his state. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so honored to present the 2025 Frederick Douglass Award to Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves. So, Governor Reeves, before we get into the specifics, I think folks have probably by now heard of the Mississippi Miracle. They have heard your name, but just start out by telling us a little bit about yourself, your early life and career in public service to the point that you are in now as governor.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the award. I am honored to receive this. It's really a great day, but it's always a great day to be a Mississippian. I'll start by telling you a little bit about where I come from, because my parents are both graduates of Bogachita High School, which is a 1A school in rural Mississippi. My dad was one of 11 who grew up in a 2-room house in Bogachita, Mississippi. He went to the local community college, one of the first in his family to be able to do so, and he went on a half football scholarship and a half basketball scholarship. I was always amazed by that. And I said, Dad, what did that mean? He said, Tate, that meant I wasn't very good in either one of them. And he went to the community college. He then moved to Jackson, put himself and earned a math degree at Mississippi College, started a small business that he is still at 76 years old running day to day as we speak. And so to me, that is the American dream. And so he had that opportunity, which put me in a position to go to a great public high school. I went to Millsaps College, which is a Division III liberal arts college there in Jackson. Got an economics degree, and managed money for a living prior to getting into the world of politics. Ran my first campaign on a theme of basically politics is a calling, not a career. And now I'm in year 22. But I only got 2 years and 1 month left, and it's been a great run. But I really think we've changed the trajectory of my state, and I couldn't be more proud of it. So
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. So as I mentioned, you've done so many great things as governor, but really the reason we're here today and so excited to give you this award is because of what's come to be known as the Mississippi Miracle. Before we get into the policy changes and the technical aspects, can you explain just what exactly has the state accomplished in recent years on education? What are the gains that have come to be known as the Mississippi Miracle? And in particular, what does that look like for low-income and minority students?
yes. So I'm from Mississippi, so we have a lot of catfish in our state. I like to tell everyone that I literally choked on my catfish when the New York Times said something positive about Mississippi. And they are the ones that coined the phrase, the Mississippi Miracle. And what I would begin with is tell you, I use that term and that phrase all the time because it gets people's attention. But please know it really wasn't a miracle at all. It was the result of good, strong conservative policy with a strong implementation phase that included a lot of accountability. And I want to start with just the results, and then we'll get into any specifics you want to get in as to what led to these results. I've been told all my life, I'm 51 years old, I've been told all my life that Mississippi is last in all the lists that are supposed to be good and first in all the lists that are where you're supposed to be bad. And when it comes to education, I never actually believed we had the worst education system in the country, but there were certainly statistics that people could point at and try to prove their point that we were. And I was brought up in a family that said, we can compete with anybody, anywhere in the world, given the opportunity. And that's the way I approach things. So here are the statistics. In 2013, Mississippi had a high school graduation rate that was 72.5%. Last year, we graduated 89.9% of our high schoolers. In 2013, look, if you feel the need to applause, it may not make you feel better, but it'll make me feel better, okay? In 2013, we implemented a series of reforms, and we'll talk about the specifics. But basically, we just had, and you'll hear me use this phrase a lot because it drives everything I do. We had a fundamental belief, and that fundamental belief was that kids in our state between pre-kindergarten and third grade needed to be learning to read. But after they get beyond the third grade, they better not be learning to read anymore. They better be reading to learn. And so we knew we had to get better. And we've got a lot of work to do, and I want to be clear about that. We've got more work to do. But in 2013, Mississippi was ranked 49th in the nation in fourth grade reading results. Last year, we were number 9 in the nation in fourth grade reading. In 2013, we were 50th in the nation in fourth grade math. And back to this notion that if you really invest in reading, it'll help across all subject matters. We were 50th in math in 2013. Last year, we were 16th in the nation. Overall, our educational system was ranked by a national service in 2013 as overall the 50th best K-12 system in America. Last year, we were ranked 16th overall. And what I want to mention here is just as a reminder, because it's to your point, which is good, strong conservative reforms have not just helped some of our kids in some of our districts, it's helped all of our kids in all of our districts. Mississippi, as you may know, has the highest percentage of African Americans in the entire country. 38% of our population is African Americans, and a much greater number than that, probably closer to 40 to 45% of our kids in our public schools are African American. In 2013, our black fourth graders, when compared to their peers around the country, Our black fourth graders scored 45th best in America. Last year, they were number 3 in America. Hispanic students in Mississippi in 2025, when compared to Hispanic students in every other state, they were number 1 in the nation in fourth grade reading results on NAEP. They were number 2 in the nation in fourth grade math. My friends, conservative policies work for kids regardless of what their income is, regardless of what their mom and dad do or don't do for a living. That if you will believe in kids and give them the tools that they need to be successful, Mississippians at least will rise up and meet those increased expectations. And that is exactly what has happened in my state.
It's absolutely incredible. So tell us, what were the specific policy reforms from 2013, your time leading the Senate, to now as governor, and kind of what was the role that you played in those reforms?
Yeah, so there was a lot of different policies that were implemented. I was elected lieutenant governor in 2011. In our state, the lieutenant governor is a very influential position in the legislative branch. The lieutenant governor in Mississippi appoints all committee chairmen, assigns all bills to the committee of his or her choice, and there is no mechanism by which a bill can come out of committee unless the committee chairman that the lieutenant governor appointed allows it to come out. And so I like to tell everybody, as governor, I have the veto pen, but there's 2/3. I gotta make sure that I don't lose 2/3 of the members of either chamber because they can override my veto. When I was lieutenant governor, I just had to convince one committee chairman that I appointed that a particular bill wasn't going to come out, and it didn't come out. Period. And so there's a lot of influence in the legislative branch by our lieutenant governor. Well, we went in and we decided we're going to do a series of reforms in the K through 12 space in 2012 and 2013, and we did. And some of them have had a huge impact. Some of them have had smaller impacts. But when taken together, they've had a huge impact, as I just mentioned. We started the process of implementing school choice in our state. We, for the first time ever, allowed for public charter schools in the legislation that passed in 2012 and 2013. We, for the first time ever, allowed for ESAs. We were one of the first states in the country that had ESAs. Now, ours have not been improved since then, and we're going to work to do that in the 2026 session yet again. But we had ESAs for special needs students. This is an interesting point, too. So special needs kids, before we had ESAs, which allows every parent to move their kid with special needs from a public school to a private school or anywhere else. Prior to us passing those, and they're relatively small in number and very inexpensive, but before we passed those, students with special needs in Mississippi graduated at a 25% clip. Last year, that number was over 70% of our special needs kids. So ESAs played a role. It was Jeb Bush who said what gets measured gets done. And so we implemented other very important tools, such as we went from a very convoluted school rating system, which was 7-tiered. And I must tell you, I kind of consider myself pretty smart, and I couldn't figure out amongst those 7 tiers which ones were good and which ones were bad, because they put in all these words that, you're like, well, what does that even mean? So we said we're going to throw all that out, and now in our state, every school and every district gets an A, B, C, D, or F, because every parent knows that if a kid in a school or a school district is getting an A, that they're doing relatively well. And if they get a D or an F, they aren't doing very well, and somebody ought to complain to the superintendent. Speaking of superintendents, Mississippi was one of the only states in the nation in 2012 that had elected school superintendents, and we changed that. We now have elected school boards and appointed school superintendents, because in a lot of jurisdictions, just because your football coach went 14-1 last year doesn't mean that he needs to be the school superintendent. And so, but he was the most popular guy in town, and if he wanted to be the school superintendent, he was going to be it. And so we changed that. Now, I like to tell you, and full disclosure, it's hard, but we did that fully knowing that the model of elected school boards and appointed superintendents is kind of like what Churchill said of democracy, right? It's the worst form of governance on the planet, except for all the rest. And we really do believe that. But we no longer have elected school superintendents. We also started consolidating school districts. We had 152 when I started in 82 counties and 152 school districts. We went in, started consolidating school districts. We now have 137. Now, some of my real conservative friends say, you've been doing this for over 10 years and you went from 152 to 137. That's the best you can do. And then I remind them that in the 100 years before I became lieutenant governor and governor, the Mississippi legislature mandated the consolidation of exactly 0 school districts in 100 years. So yeah, it's been a tough slog, but it's been very important because again, obviously, less administration, more money in the classroom is really ultimately what we're doing. And then finally, I'll just mention something that probably gets the most credit and deservedly so. We instituted and passed legislation which at the time we called the third grade reading gate. Everybody hated us using the term third grade reading gate, but that's what it was. We said if you're at the end of the third grade and you're a kid that reads, and we test every student at the end of the third grade, and if you score here or above, you get to go to the fourth grade. If you score here or below, you're held back in the third grade. No questions asked. There is no social promotion in the state of Mississippi. You either can read at an adequate level or you cannot. And so that's probably had the single biggest impact. We did it in the right way. Our cut score in 2013 was relatively low to be able to pass because we had to be realistic about it. But we then have raised the cut score now 4 different times since 2013, and it's time for us to raise it again. And I'm gonna advocate for us doing so again. What gets measured gets done, and the reality is that more than anything else, that has played a critical role. Knowing that we did that, we also invested $15 million in hiring reading coaches. Those reading coaches went into the schools. They helped kids that were struggling become better readers. And then more importantly, those reading coaches that the state paid 100% of their freight for, they also went in and they taught the teachers how to be better teachers, particularly in teaching reading. And oh, by the way, we said, look, there's been this long-standing debate as to the best way to teach reading. We don't know what the really smart people on the East Coast and the West Coast are going to do, but we're going to go back to teaching phonics-based reading, period, end of discussion. And that's what we've done. And it's led the revival in our state that I talked about. And now, and this is what's so exciting to me, now everybody involved in the educational world is proud of what we've done, and success begets success. And a lot of people who literally, because I was there, fought me tooth and nail to get these various reforms done, now take credit for them. And that's okay, because it doesn't matter who gets the credit, because the winners here are the young people in our state. We've got a lot more work to do, but wow, we've made some real progress.
Yeah, that is fantastic. You alluded to ESAs. A FREOPP scholar named Dan Lips, who is over here, is actually one of the original architects of the concept of an ESA, I think 25 years ago. And so it's fantastic to see his work come to fruition. We're seeing this enormous momentum for ESAs all across the country in kind of the post-COVID years, kind of universal ESAs. What is the outlook for that in Mississippi, and what would your message be to lawmakers who are facing pushback or are a little bit hesitant to take that leap?
Yeah, so we've been having this particular battle in our state now for almost 15 years. Going into the 2026 session, we have a Speaker of the House named Jason White that has made education freedom his number one priority for the 2026 session. I commend him for that. I wholeheartedly support his efforts to do that, and I am 100% on board. It's going to be hard. We need everyone pulling in the same direction. My message to my friends in the legislature, particularly my Republican friends, is this: President Trump supports universal school choice in Mississippi. I support universal school choice in Mississippi. Our 4 neighboring states in Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Alabama have all passed it within the last couple of years. What do they know that they are so much smarter than all of those individuals that have been constantly elected? And so I'm hopeful. We've been working the phones, working with legislators, trying to meet their concerns, trying to make sure that we craft a piece of legislation that gets not just a vote of, in the House of Representatives of 62 Republicans, but we're hopeful that we can get more than that, and we're hopeful that we can get some Democrats on board as well. It's hard. When we passed all these reforms in 2012 and 2013, I did have a number of Democrat state senators who, by the way, they made it really hard for them, but they voted with us. And several of them, just to be fair, have been elevated to higher office in our state. And it's because people appreciate those who are willing to do the best thing for children, whether it's in the best interest of the adults that are within what we call the coalition of the status quo and the education establishment or not. And so, again, I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to make tremendous movement, but it's going to be a battle, and it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, that's great. So moving to a different phase of the education journey, another cause you've championed, and we were just talking about it beforehand, is workforce development and just innovative workforce solutions to make it easier to build skills, build a career in Mississippi. What have you done in that space, and what are the principles that have guided you?
Well, I'm going to start with one fundamental principle, and because, again, it drives everything here. All of the issues that y'all work on to try to make people's lives better, all of the issues that policymakers all around the country that work on every single day to try to make people's lives better in America. What I would submit to you, a fundamental principle is this. There aren't many of those issues that if every individual in my state has 2 things. Number 1, an opportunity for, and number 2, the skills that they need for a job that pays $60,000, $70,000, or $80,000 a year. Most all these other issues take care of themselves if those 2 criteria are met. And that's really, I've got my head of economic development here with me today because we've got meetings here, and that's one of the things that we're working on, job creation and skills development. So first of all, we define education in Mississippi not as K through 12. We define education in Mississippi as pre-kindergarten to lifelong learning. Because if you're 40 years old, the fact that maybe you didn't get as good an education as you needed, or you don't have the skills that you need to get a $70,000, $80,000, or $90,000 a year job, whether it's your fault or not, the best thing for our economy is for that person who wants to work and wants to do better in life for their family, that they have the opportunity to do so and they can learn skills. So when we came in, we completely revamped the way in which we do workforce development and workforce training. It is primarily private sector driven now. So we instituted a new workforce development board. We call it Accelerate Mississippi in our state. I appoint the executive board members, but everyone I've appointed is outside of government because they know better what jobs are needed and what skills are needed in those jobs than anybody that is in the government sector. And so we created Accelerate Mississippi. What we found is we spent at that time about $350 to $375 million a year on programs that could be considered workforce training, but there was no single entity in charge. And when there's no single entity in charge, it's kind of like the college football team that has 2 or 3 quarterbacks. Usually if you have 2 or 3 quarterbacks, what that really means is you don't have any quarterbacks because you've got to have a leader and a starter. And so we now have an entity in Accelerate that coordinates all workforce development. They have accountability, both from their board and from me, and they have done incredible work in really changing the level of skills in our state. And what that ultimately does is it drives another issue, workforce participation. We've finally turned in COVID all across the U.S., workforce participation started doing this, we've actually turned that curve in our state, and we've seen an increase in workforce participation of almost 300 basis points, of almost 3% in the last 3 years, and it's continuing. And the reason is that, oftentimes, particularly on the lower skill side of things, we are not competing, one company is not competing with another company to hire that individual. Rightly or wrongly, and I would argue wrongly, those private sector entities are competing with the federal government, who will pay them to not work. And so what you have to do is upskill that individual such that they're not just available and capable of doing a $30,000 or $35,000 a year job, because it's not, the economic decision for that individual is to not take that job. But if you give them the skills that they need and the opportunity for a $50,000 or $60,000 or $70,000 a year job, they'll get in the workforce. And what we all in this room know, I hope, is that having a job is not just simply about earning money. It gives you life. It gives you purpose. It gives you the opportunity to take care of your family. And that has so many positive impacts on that individual. And that's really been our focus.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It really embodies what many of us have come to know as the dignity of earned success, is what I think you're exactly speaking to. You've also championed a number of more traditional economic growth reforms, so to speak, like eliminating the income tax, reducing regulations. In a state like yours, what is your hope and an expectation of those particular reforms as it pertains to upward mobility and economic growth?
Well, look, again, Bill Cork is here, who runs economic development. He has a great saying. Every time we meet with a prospect, and oh, by the way, as of yesterday, where we announced a new $3 billion CapEx in our state, my predecessor in 8 years announced $7.2 billion in new CapEx in Mississippi. We've now announced almost $49 billion in new capital investments in our state in the 5 years I've been governor. And so, but the way we look at this, and when we talk to prospects that are looking to invest capital and hire people, we see our role as a role that can give us a competitive advantage, as if we can help them go from spending money to making money faster than any other state, then we have a real good chance to win that project. There are a lot of different ways in which to do that. Clearly, regulatory reform, we have really enacted significant regulatory reform in our state. We have a Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality. We work with the EPA, whether it's a Republican administration or a Democrat administration, but our head of MDEQ, which is our state regulatory body, knows that his job is to try to get to yes. We're not going to skirt any federal laws. We're not going to skirt any state laws. We're going to do what's right for the environment. But we start with trying to get to yes, rather than saying no, no, no until you convince us otherwise. And I think that helps us. Income tax elimination has been something that I've been working on now for 15 years. I finally signed the bill into law in March or April of 2025, where we have a pathway to income tax elimination now. We'll go, we were at 5% across the board a couple of years ago. We're now at 4.3, and in 2026 we'll be at 4%. By 2029 we'll be at 3% individual income tax across the board. And then we have a trigger mechanism in place that is it's going to be a fairly easy hurdle to get over. So we'll have no income tax in our state sometime in mid to late 2030s, which, to be fair, some say that's really way too long, and I don't disagree with that. But unfortunately, we have to work through a legislative process. But we are the only state in the nation since Alaska, who obviously has considerable oil revenues, but since Alaska did it in the late 1980s, to actually put a bill on the books. If you had an income tax and you don't have one now, we're the only state since the late 80s to actually do that. And I'm very proud of that fact. And we think right now, just to put it in perspective, there are 9 states in America that have no income tax. Of the 41 that have one, we currently have the 5th lowest. And so we're trying to go from basically 14th down to be tied on an income tax level with those other 9 states. And I'll just end with this because I don't have much time. but we really didn't have a choice if we want to be competitive. You don't have to be a geography major to know that Texas to our west, Florida to our east, and Tennessee to our north have zero income tax. If we're going to be competitive, we've got to get on the same page with them. And so to their credit, and I'll just conclude with this, Republican governors get it, and we compete with each other every single day. We also don't mind stealing good ideas from each other, and no income tax is a great idea that we've been able to steal from some of those other states.
That's great. Let me let you close with this, Governor. Last question. How would you describe your philosophy, and what is one thing you want people in this room, in this city, to know about the people of the state of Mississippi?
I always harp back, obviously, I hate to quote this individual because his daughter lives just to the northwest of me and is a competing governor of mine. But I love to always quote Mike Huckabee. When he ran for president, he said, "I'm an unabashed conservative, but I ain't mad at anybody about it." And I think that is really really a way in which to describe my approach to things. I'm a hardcore conservative. I think government does a whole lot of things, and they're good at doing very little. And the more we can get government out of people's decision-making process, the better off America and Americans are going to be. But I also know that as challenging as our political environment is, particularly within a, 3 or 4 mile radius of where we sit today, as difficult as that can be, I also know that my 3 daughters, just like me before them, are fortunate enough to grow in the greatest state, grow up in the greatest state, in the greatest nation in the history of mankind. And so every one of these battles are worth fighting. They're worth fighting, but we also have to live to fight another day as well. And so I believe that over the long haul, good ideas win. And I'm not willing to make a decision today or tomorrow that's going to hurt us over winning in the long term. And so that's really my governing philosophy. The one challenge that I will tell you that I have, because I believe when I say I live in the greatest state and the greatest nation in the history of mankind. If you've never been to Mississippi, come visit. Because the reality is, whether it's tourism or economic development, in our state, the biggest challenge we have, based upon some of the preconceptions that you mentioned in the introduction, the biggest challenge we have is convincing someone to come there once. If you ever come there once, you're going to like what you see. And so the biggest challenge I have is, we had the second fastest growing economy in the country in 2024. We had the second fastest growing family income in the country in 2024. We had the 4th fastest per capita income growth in the country in 2024. The biggest challenge I have is that Mississippi is the best kept secret in all of the world. The challenge is about 2/3 of my constituents want to keep it that way. And so what my challenge to them is convincing them that we can grow the pie, we can grow the economy for all of our people and still keep Mississippi, Mississippi. And I think I've just about convinced at least a majority of them that is the truth and that is the facts. And the way you do it is by creating opportunity through freedom for the individual. It's not about groupthink. It's not that the best decisions come out of Washington, D.C. The best decisions in America, in this experiment we call America, where we're going to celebrate our 250th birthday next year, is because of the greatness, not of some entity, not of some city, not because of some government official. The greatness of America is because of the individual and the decisions that they make. And that's the bottom line.
That is fantastic, and a fantastic way to close. Governor Reeves, congratulations, and thank you very much for joining us. Fantastic.